we obtain cures and improvements, but no failures. Who is this? This was a Portuguese neurologist, Egas Moniz, upon the occasion of his receiving the Nobel Prize for inventing frontal lobotomies. Final quote, and this is the worst one yet. The immensely high reproduction rate in the moral imbecile has long been established. This phenomenon leads everywhere to the fact that socially inferior human material is enabled to penetrate and finally to annihilate the healthy nation. The selection for toughness, heroism, social utility must be accomplished by some human institution if mankind is not to be ruined by domestication-induced degeneracy. The racial idea as the basis of our state has already accomplished much in this respect with the extermination of elements of the population loaded with dregs. Who was this? Was this Hitler? Nah, Hitler was a little bit busy with other things. This was one of the scientists who supported Hitler. This was a scientist who we all know from those Time Life specials, a scientist named Konrad Lorenz. Konrad Lorenz, we all know from those pictures, this cherubic Austrian guy with his little suspenders and shorts and the little duckies following around. Konrad Lorenz, who was also a Nazi propagandist, served time as a war prisoner afterward for doing so. This is a man pathologically stuck in a different bucket of explaining behavior, one that happens to be built around the notion of saying that something's broken which ain't broken and coming up with the most appalling possible fix. These are not obscure scientists. These are not marginalized individuals. These are some of the most influential humans of the last century. They have shaped how we educate people, how we medicalize people, how we institutionalize them. They have an influence on 9-12 million people being vaporized by war. These are people who were pathologically unable to think about the biology of our behavior in a subtle way. And that is what we are going to try to avoid doing here. Now, when we think about this issue, again, it is not trivial to try to approach the subject looking at the biology of human social behavior. And there's a bunch of challenges intrinsic in this. Some of the time, the challenge of making sense of humans is recognizing that we are exactly like every other kid on the block, every other animal out there when it comes to the biology of our behavior. One example of this. Okay. You are a hamster. You are a female hamster. And as is the tendency as a female hamster, what you do is you ovulate every 4 days. That's the ovulatory cycle of a female hamster. Every 4 days, except under a certain circumstance, somebody has taken another female hamster and put her in the cage with you. And over the next couple of weeks, what happens is you both begin to extend your cycles and you synchronize them. Within 3 cycles or so, you are ovulating at the exact same time. And this is this amazing phenomenon. What's even more amazing about it is it's done entirely with odors. The odor of one of the females synchronizes the cycle of the other one. How can you demonstrate this? You can use the famed nose clip test. You simply close up the hamster's nose, it doesn't happen anymore, or you damage the olfactory system, or in the most elegant version, you don't actually put the second female in the same cage as the first. You just pump the air from one cage into the next one, and they synchronize their cycles. It's absolutely extraordinary. What is really striking is it's not random which female synchronizes who. The female who is more socially dominant synchronizes the other one there. And this is really wild, and this is very widespread. You can show this in hamsters, you can show this in all sorts of other rodents and primate species. You can show this in pigs. Apparently, if you were some farm kid out in Iowa or something, you can go down to the local 7-Eleven and buy some product. Apparently, it's called Matrix, and what it is some big old can of spray, and you go back home and you spray it all over your pigs, and they all synchronize their cycle. I have no idea why you should want to do this. I grew up in New York City, and we never attempted to do this to our farmyard animals, but for some reason there's a reason to do this, and you go out and you can synchronize pig ovulatory cycles by taking advantage of these odorants, these pheromone things. It's remarkable. And what the most remarkable thing is, it works exactly the same way in humans. It's called the Wellesley effect, named after Wellesley College, all-women's college, where in the early 70s, a scientist named Martha McClintock showed this, and showed that women who wind up in the dorm together, within about 3 cycles or so, close roommates are beginning to synchronize their cycles. except for one exception. And this is the same thing you see in the hamsters. Take a male hamster and plunk them down into the cage with these two synchronized females, and their cycles scramble and desynchronize. The same thing in humans. All of these roommates had their cycles tending to synchronize except for the ones who had boyfriends, close, intimate relations. And this was then followed up with some really high-tech science where you would get women volunteer and they would take little gauze pads and get their armpits and show that just the smell of one of these things could do the synchronizing instead. And unless you had a nose cold, once again, it was non-random. There are hints in the literature that women who were more socially extroverted, more socially dominant, synchronized the other one too. This is well enough understood that when I was in college, people would sit around the dinner table and say, bragging, when we roomed together this summer, I had her synchronized by August 1st. This is a problem with living with biologists, but this is very well understood. And the most striking thing here is we are just like every other animal out there, and the big challenge often is recognizing that and accepting that. Now, some of the time, the challenge takes a second form, which is recognizing we have the exact same physiology as any other animal out there. We have our bodies working in the same way, except we use that physiology in circumstances that are unrecognizable elsewhere in the animal world. Let me give you an example of that. You take two humans, and they are involved in this strange human ritual. They sit at a table, they're silent, they make no eye contact with each other, and just every now and then one of them ritualistically picks up their hand and moves a little piece of wood on the table. And if these were the right humans in the right circumstance, two grandmaster chess players in a tournament, their bodies are doing the exact same thing as some male baboon who's just savaged his opponent and ripped open his stomach on the Serengeti at dawn. The physiology of people during grandmaster chess tournaments approach that of people running marathons in terms of blood pressure, heart rate, in terms of how many extra thousands of calories their bodies go through each day, and they're doing nothing more than thinking. And some of the time, what is remarkable about us as humans is we could turn on classical physiology, the type you would get running for your life, and all you're doing then is thinking about the fact that, you know what, someday my heart's going to stop beating. Pooh, sudden stress response there. We can turn on classical, boring mammalian physiology with the most abstract of cognitive states. And that begins to explain some of our propensity towards stress-related disease, for example. A stress response system designed to sprint you away from a predator, and we turn it on for 30-year mortgages. We turn it on thinking about tragic events on the other side of the globe. We turn it on in abstract states. Some of the time what makes us challengingly human is the fact that we have boring